It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Israel's deadly attack on unarmed aid workers in Gaza. Sky News reveals a comprehensive account of the incident and evidence of a cover-up. The US strikes targets in Yemen, which the Houthis say has left at least 74 dead. I want it to end. Donald Trump's message on the war in Ukraine, but he warns America could still walk away from negotiations.
If for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, and we're going to just take a pass.
One person dies trying to cross the Channel in a week that's seen a record number of people making the journey in small boats. 2 British people are amongst the 4 killed after a cable car plunges into a ravine near Naples. And returning a 6-time Grand Slam champion, Rory McIlroy touches down back home in Northern Ireland. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. For weeks, Israel has refused to answer questions about what happened to 15 paramedics and aid workers killed after their convoy was attacked by Israeli troops in Gaza. Now, a detailed investigation by Sky News can reveal the most comprehensive account yet of how the tragedy unfolded. It exposes how Israeli forces opened fire on clearly marked emergency vehicles, that the attack continued for hours, and now claims of a cover-up. Here's our special correspondent, Alex Crawford.
This is the final footage, filmed by a medic in Gaza, gunned down and killed by Israeli forces on March 23rd, along with more than a dozen of his colleagues. They were on their way to help another emergency crew wounded in an earlier Israeli attack. The man who filmed the video was Rifat Radwan. His body was found in a shallow grave. His phone, with the footage detailing the last minutes of his life, was still in his pocket. And that footage has blown up the IDF's initial narrative about the killings.
So many questions. Why they were killed? They were wearing their gears. The lights were on.
The world wants answers. What exactly happened here? And will anyone be held accountable?
Using visual evidence, audio analysis, and our interviews with family members, a survivor, colleagues, doctors, and forensic specialists, we've pieced together the most comprehensive timeline so far of what happened on the morning of March the 23rd. From 3:52, when the first ambulance was dispatched, onto 5:08, when the attack began, and then 7:25, when the last of the communication with first responders was lost. It all builds a clearer picture of the Israeli military's attack and burial of what was clearly marked emergency vehicles. Now that their families and colleagues want accountability and justice for their deaths.
Staying with the Middle East, US airstrikes have killed 74 people in Yemen, according to the Houthis. It marks a ramping up of Donald Trump's campaign of strikes in the country, hitting an oil port for the first time. Nicole Johnston reports.
US airstrikes pound Yemen in the deadliest attack on the country since President Trump started bombing Houthi rebels a month ago. The target, an oil terminal in Ras Isa, north of the port city of Hodeidah. The US military says it is targeting the Houthis' main source of revenue, oil. The Houthis say dozens of people have been killed. The attack happened on Thursday, and most of the pictures from it are too graphic to show. It is clear from this that the battle in Yemen is intensifying.
They targeted a civilian site over there. As you can see, the casualties are all civilians that work at this facility.
Those lucky to survive were being treated, often in the most basic way. Here, a young boy watches it all, in shock. More than 100 people were injured. The Houthis say they will continue to fight.
We maintain that our military operations will continue as long as the genocide in Gaza persists and the siege on its people remains, despite the sacrifices we're prepared to make.
A drone fired from Yemen is taken down by a French ship. It's part of the mission, patrolling the Red Sea to protect commercial shipping lanes. Since the war in Gaza started, Houthi rebels have attacked ships and fired missiles towards Israel. The group says it will stop when there is a ceasefire. President Trump has warned hell will rain down on them if they don't.
Trump team looks like they want to degrade the Houthi capabilities. In terms of the intensity of the strikes, the number of strikes, and how far and wide they're distributed across the northern parts of Yemen.
In the capital Sana'a, people protest against the war in Gaza and against the US airstrikes. This nation has endured a lot, and now its Houthi rebels are President Trump's latest target. Nicole Johnston, Sky News.
To the war of words now, threatening to develop into a full-blown constitutional crisis in the US, and the man caught up in the centre of it. To his Democrat supporters, Kilmar Albrego Garcia, deported to El Salvador in error, is the victim of a White House prepared to ignore due process and the rule of law. But to the Trump administration, he's a violent gang member who will not be allowed to return to the US. Donald Trump said Mr. Garcia's wife had accused her husband of abuse.
In 2020 and 2021, Garcia's wife filed for a protective order from him and said he was violent and abusive and really scary. Garcia's wife also wrote in court, "At this point, I am afraid to be close to him. I just don't want to be close. I have multiple photos and videos, how violent he can be, and all of the bruises that he's left on me." She just couldn't get anywhere near him. This is the man that the Democrats are wanting us to fly back from El Salvador.
Well, in the last hour, Democratic US Senator Chris Van Hollen, arriving back from El Salvador, where he met with Mr. Garcia and standing next to Mr. Garcia's wife, Jennifer, said the case posed a risk to the Constitution itself.
As the federal courts have said, we need to bring Mr. Abrego Garcia home to protect his constitutional rights to due process. And it's also important that people understand this case is not just about one man. It's about protecting the constitutional rights of everybody who resides in the United States of America.
Our US correspondent David Blevins joins me now from Washington. David, we have a senator saying Mr. Garcia needs to come back, and the court saying that also, but a president saying that he won't bring him back. Who's going to win?
Well, the answer to the question, where does the power lie, will tell us the extent to which the United States is facing a constitutional crisis over this case. Kilmar Albrego Garcia was deported in error to El Salvador, and the Supreme Court has ordered the administration to facilitate his return. The president himself has now waded into this, listing allegations against the 29-year-old in a bid to justify the resistance to that order. And that's why the Democratic senator for Maryland, who's been to visit his constituent in El Salvador, is describing this as a constitutional issue and something that goes to the heart of the Constitution for every single American. But we've also learned a lot now that the senator has returned. We know that Mr. Garcia didn't know where he was going because there were no windows on the aeroplane. He was frightened to find himself in that maximum security prison in El Salvador. He'd no idea about the legal and political storm that has been whipped up around his case. And he has now been moved to a different detention facility. And perhaps that's because there is now also a public relations battle going on, which the senator has been talking about. When he posted his picture with his constituent last night, there were no margarita glasses on the table. But when the president of El Salvador, who's an ally of Donald Trump, posted pictures of that event, there were margarita glasses on the table. The senator claims it was a presidential aide who placed them there to mock concerns about the conditions in the prison. But at the end of the day, it's not just about images, it's not about public relations. It's about a 29-year-old father of three who's currently detained in El Salvador, despite having never gone through due process in the United States.
David, thank you. Well, staying with the impact of the Trump White House, and the president has spoken to Sir Keir Starmer today about the prospects of a trade deal. Let's cross live now to our political correspondent Rob Powell, who's in Westminster for us. And Rob, does this look like progress on a potential deal?
It seems like a bit of an update, really, Gillian. This is the first time that Keir Starmer has spoken to Donald Trump since those wide-ranging tariffs were brought in earlier this month, including, of course, those 10% blanket tariffs on everything coming from the UK into the US. Now, the UK version of this call, the readout that we get, certainly emphasised trade in the conversation as those talks go on to try and get the UK some sort of carve-out from that extensive tariff regime. Number 10 said that the Prime Minister reiterated his commitment to free and open trade and the importance of protecting the national interest. Now, the US version, the US readout from the White House of the call simply said that the pair discussed bilateral trade as well as issues such as Ukraine and other foreign affairs issues as well. I think the President, to an extent, played down the expectations of a breakthrough earlier this week, yesterday, when he said essentially that he was in no hurry to do a deal because of the amount of money that all of these tariffs were bringing in. What was not mentioned in the UK readout was the state visit that Donald Trump is due to come on to the UK. Of course, earlier this week, Donald Trump also suggested a date for when that would happen, or a month at least, that it would take place, he thought, in September. In the White House text around this call, it simply says that Donald Trump said that he looked forward to his upcoming state visit with the King in the United Kingdom later this year. Now, we're also going to get the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, going to the US, going to Washington next week. She's going for a summit of the International Monetary Fund, but she'll also have meetings with her US counterparts in the White House, where trade will be discussed. Tonight, though, she struck a tone on China in a newspaper interview that may not go down terribly well with Team Trump. She's done an interview with The Telegraph where she was asked if the UK would essentially pull back from trade with China to placate Donald Trump, and she said that she didn't believe, she thought it would be very foolish for Britain to disengage with Beijing. Now, of course, the US has been engaged in a trade war with China and has been attempting to essentially isolate the world's second biggest economy. What might be going on here on the UK side, though, is attempting to patch up relations with Beijing after last weekend and the government taking control of that Chinese-owned company. But I think it also shows maybe some of the perils of trying to square off the diplomatic priorities between this White House and relationships elsewhere around the world.
Indeed. Rob, thank you. The US will abandon the negotiations to end the war in Ukraine if progress is not made soon. Donald Trump told reporters at the White House that he is still hoping for a deal, but wants it done quickly. And if the parties involved make it difficult, then the US is going to walk away. His comments followed America's top diplomat, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, saying the US wants to see progress in a matter of days. Our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons reports.
There is no peace in Ukraine, and in Kharkiv there is little notion of a ceasefire. This, the destruction caused by Russia's latest missile strike. Dozens injured and at least one killed. More than 3 years into this war, and it grinds on relentlessly. At least American, European and Ukrainian leaders did meet in Paris, for once gathered in the same place to discuss the future. It's not so long since America was bullish about pushing through a peace deal, now that confidence seems to have ebbed away.
This war has no military solution to it. It really doesn't. It's not going to be decided with, neither side has some strategic capability to end this war quickly. And so what we're talking about here is avoiding thousands and thousands of people from dying over the next year. We're trying to avoid that. But we're not going to continue to fly all over the world and do meeting after meeting after meeting if no progress is being made. So if they're serious about peace, either side or both, we want to help. If it's not going to happen, then we're just going to move on.
But across Europe, America's vice president was pitching up in Rome, there to meet the Italian Prime Minister, who had herself just flown back from Washington, where she had met President Trump. Now, if all that sounds confusing, well, J.D. Vance struck a very different note from his own colleagues.
The negotiations, I won't prejudge them, but we do feel optimistic that we can hopefully bring this war, this very brutal war, to a close.
The president watched all this unfold and followed in with his own take, first saying America could walk away from talks, then backing a deal.
I know when people are playing us and I know when they're not, and I have to see an enthusiasm to want to end it. And I think I see that enthusiasm. I think I see it from both sides.
So who's right? Is a deal close or distant? In Moscow, few clues. Russia says it has stuck to the rules of a very limited ceasefire, which only prevents it from attacking energy infrastructure, but it hints at progress.
The Russian Federation adhered to this moratorium, which cannot be said about the Ukrainian side. Therefore, certain developments have already been made, but of course there are still many difficult discussions ahead.
America and Ukraine have agreed a deal over mineral rights, but in Kharkiv, another smoking ruin tells you that the conflict rumbles on. The fog of war blended with the White House's new values. It is very hard to know if negotiations are prospering or failing, or somehow both. Adam Parsons, Sky News.
A migrant has died during a medical emergency while attempting to cross the English Channel in a small boat. A responding Royal Lifeboat vessel brought a group of migrants into Dover this morning, and the man was pronounced dead. It comes on a week that's seen record numbers of arrivals, as Sadia Chowdhury reports.
Familiar pictures and now an increasingly familiar tragedy. Another death of a migrant on the English Channel. The Home Office says Border Force responded to a medical emergency on a small boat entering UK waters. It said investigations are ongoing. On the rescue vessel, a man's lifeless body, the only part that will make it to shore. The others who had accompanied him sit in red life jackets, still clinging to a dream of life in the UK. They hobble up a ramp and into the UK's bulging asylum system.
They travel across from their native countries to wherever it is that they're headed to go, which they have every right to choose which country they want to come to. And some that come to the northern France want to come to the UK. And their reasons can be really varied, from having family here already, to having a decent level of spoken English, to meeting with friends that have already made it across here.
They are among more than 9,000 migrants who have crossed the Channel so far this year. That is a record number. Look at how it surpasses figures from previous years. We are already 45% up from this time last year. Before coming to power, the Prime Minister had said he'd look to reach a returns agreement with the EU. No such deal has yet materialised, and these figures will no doubt signal failure here at the Home Office, which has, under multiple governments, tried to stop the small boats. From operational cooperation with France to the Rwanda scheme, the plans keep getting shelved, but the boats don't stop. The latest plan is for a one-for-one swap with France to increase deterrence. It would see undocumented migrants return to France in a swap for those with legitimate asylum claims.
This just won't satisfy the public's understandable demand for action. What we need is a much more comprehensive solution. The Rwanda policy offered that. I recognise that we weren't able to get that off the ground during our time in office, but I do think that it's something that government should revisit, because what you cannot do is tepid policy responses to this. This is sophisticated organised crime. You have to do something very, very different. And a one-in, one-out arrangement with France just doesn't stand up to the mark.
Talks between France and the UK are underway, but a one-for-one swap scheme may not be able to keep up with these record numbers or prevent further tragedies. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News.
Italian police have confirmed that 2 British tourists are amongst 4 people killed in a cable car accident in Italy. Sky correspondent Amelia Harper has more.
From a fire service helicopter, a gap in the trees, where inside lies the wreck of a cable car's cabin. Its intended path visible through the clouds on the slopes of Mount Fato, overlooking Mount Vesuvius and the Bay of Naples. But its cable snapped, the cabin nearest the summit crashing down, killing 4 people, including 2 British tourists. Those in charge aren't sure why.
Before opening the cableway, there were 3 months of tests, and then the checks are repeated every morning. The ropes are subjected to x-rays and checks. Everything we had to do was done. Evidently something went wrong. We don't know what. Whether an exceptional unforeseen event or human error, the investigators will discover all this.
Through the dense woodland, rescuers try to reach any survivors. The 50 firefighters involved saved one man, airlifted with critical injuries. But those inside this car were luckier. The only other cabin suspended at the foot of the mountain. 9 people were evacuated one by one in harnesses. And this is what's left. Snapped cables draped across the road. The remnants of an attraction that reopened for the season just 1 week ago. The scene's not dissimilar to 2021, where 14 people died. This, another cable car crash in the Italian Alps near Lake Maggiore. Italian prosecutors have opened an investigation into multiple manslaughter and culpable disaster. Questions remain about a tourist trip turned tragedy. Amelia Harper, Sky News.
A British man has died after being buried in an avalanche at a ski resort in the French Alps. The 27-year-old, who is yet to be named, was found buried under snow at the side of a road in Val Thorens following the avalanche yesterday morning. He was taken to hospital in Grenoble but died last night. Heavy snowfall in the Alps has cut off resorts across France, Italy and Switzerland and left some areas without electricity. Rory McIlroy has returned to Belfast following his Masters win last weekend. The Masters champion, who became the first European and only the 6th player ever to complete the Golf Grand Slam, was seen arriving at the city's airport earlier today. After his dramatic win in Augusta last Sunday, the 35-year-old said he couldn't wait to return to Northern Ireland to celebrate with his parents. A mafia-like gang war has broken out in Scotland as want-to-be drug lords fight to take over from high-profile gangsters who've been jailed. More than 100 police officers are now racing to bring down rival gangs responsible for a spree of firebombings on homes connected to well-known crime bosses. Our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillies reports.
Keep on running. This is what a gang war looks like. The soundtrack of brazen attacks filmed as a taunt to rival gangsters. Violence and torture captured on camera. This shooting, the aim of their game. And this house reveals the aftermath of a vicious attack where a 12-year-old and 72-year-old woman were left for dead. It is escalating violence in Scotland's biggest cities between feuding drug lords and notorious families grappling for control of the cartel.
I was a drug smuggler for several years.
A sign of a shift in the way gangs are operating.
It's barbaric in the way when young people, children, get pulled into the crossfire and their life's at threat, at least with the old sort of mafiosa, Cosa Nostra, where at least they had a sort of unwritten rule that no children, no other family members.
It comes after these banana boxes imported from South America containing £100 million worth of cocaine were traced to Glasgow mafia boss Jamie Stevenson. He is now in jail, a case cracked after police hacked an encrypted messaging system called EncroChat. This seems to be escalating. Why is this?
Well, part of it is about the paranoia that's inherent in organised crime, that they are always paranoid about what's happening around about them. You've got people who are in prison who still want to have influence. On the outside, you've got wannabes who are coming forward and they think this is an opportunity for them. And then you've got others who have old scores to settle that they couldn't settle when crime bosses were around.
The pressure is on for the near 100 police officers racing to get control and make arrests. But these are sophisticated networks well established in the criminal underworld of these cities. And this time, their attacks are being deliberately filmed. It's a game of goading, and they don't care who's caught in the crossfire. It's claimed it's teenagers doing the dirty work for crime bosses, pulling the strings from abroad. And they, it seems, will stop at nothing in the pursuit of power. Conor Gillies, Sky News, Glasgow.
Time now to get all the very latest sports news with Jasper.
Thank you very much. We start in the Championship and the race to win promotion to the Premier League next season. Leeds remain top of the table on goal difference from Burnley after a 1-0 win over Oxford. The only goal of the game came in the first half. Maynard Solomon, the scorer. Burnley came from a goal down to beat nine-man Watford 2-1. Josh Brownhill scored the winner just before the hour mark. Watford's Musa Sissoko and Edo Kiambe were both sent off in the second half. Sheffield United are back in the hunt for a top 2 finish. They beat Cardiff 2-0 to end a run of 3 straight defeats. United led 1-0 at the break. Gustavo Harmer put them in front after 34 minutes. The second goal came 3 minutes from time. Kiefer Moore capitalised on some poor Cardiff defending to set up Ben Brereton Diaz. United are 5 points outside the automatic promotion places. Arguably the goal of the day came from Sunderland's Sir Eli Mayenda at Bristol City. He picked up the ball deep inside his own half before carving his way through the City defence to give them the lead at Ashton Gate. However, Bristol City came back to win 2-1 to stay 5th in the table, 1 place behind Sunderland. At the bottom of the table, there was a big win for Luton. They beat fellow strugglers Derby County 1-0. Milanich Ali scored the goal in after 10 minutes. Liverpool head coach Arne Slot hasn't given up hope Trent Alexander-Arnold could join Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk by signing a new contract at the club. The defender, who's been heavily linked with a move to Real Madrid this summer, could return from injury for this weekend's game against Leicester. A win would see Liverpool win the Premier League if rivals Arsenal lose at Ipswich. Both games are live on Sky Sports Premier League on Sunday.
He's worked so hard during the whole season and now in his rehab to be back with the team again. And the fans of Liverpool, everyone who watches football for the last 5, 6 or 7 years knows that he's an incredible fullback. Has been an incredible fullback for this football club. And let's see what the future brings.
Well, Britain's Lando Norris was fastest in second practice for Sunday's Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Norris, who leads the World Championship by 3 points after 4 races this year, was just under 0.2 of a second quicker than his McLaren teammate Oscar Piastri. World champion Max Verstappen was 3rd quickest, whilst Lewis Hamilton was back in 13th place for Ferrari. In the Super League, Hull KR beat rivals Hull FC 28-14 to stay top of the table. Hull FC had Cade Cust sent off in the first half. First red card of the season. The Australian was given his marching orders for a dangerous shoulder barge to the face of Arthur Morgu after 16 minutes. Hull KR ran in 4 tries in all, including this one from Oliver Gildarts. They've now won 7 of their first 8 games this season. Last season's grand final winners Wigan are up to 2nd in the table. They beat rivals St Helens 24 points to 14. This is the second of 2 tries for Jai Field. Leeds Rhinos ran in 5 tries in a 28-6 win over Huddersfield Giants at Headingley. The win moves them up to 5th in the table. There's plenty more for you over on Sky Sports News. We'll be back later this evening.